Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and figured I'd do a twofer today because we have the second issue of Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong 2 out, and we've got the first episode of Ultraman Omega, both in the same week, and in the same week as Jurassic World Rebirth. It has been a very busy week in nerd circles today, particularly if you're a fan of dinosaurs and kaiju. But I've already spoken about Rebirth, so let's go in order and get to the comic first. Now, this particular issue, I will let you know up front, even though there are variant covers that have Godzilla on them, or as well as Rodan and Mothra, none of them are in this issue. This is a very Kong focused issue because we're pretty much staying on Skull Island and focusing on Kong. But if you want your giant reptile fix, well, that's where the titanized Killer Croc on this cover comes into play. Yes, he is in the book, and he gets a pretty decent fight with Kong that Superman and Supergirl try to interfere with. But as you remember from the first issue, their powers are slightly weakened on the monsterverse Earth, so that's proving to be quite a problem. Killer Croc's Titanized design looks pretty good overall. I mean, you can easily see how he could go from Killer Croc to this, although with the head, it kind of looks like the Violator from the Spawn comics, particularly that jaw, which looks way longer than the upper jaw. And I don't think we ever actually see him at an angle other than either frontal or three-quarter turned. Yeah, but pretty much always at that angle. So we don't know from the profile if his lower jaw really is longer than his upper jaw. And maybe we're just not supposed to think about it. But either way, that delivers your fight for the issue. And we also get our first taste of the Flash being in peril. I did say this issue seemed like it was going to be, this series, I should say, seemed like it was going to be more Flash centric because the first issue set up that Flash, Barry, is marrying Iris and he's going to tell her about his superhero identity at some point, but he hasn't yet. And now, of course, he's got to go to a completely different universe. So the structure is kind of similar to the first one where, first issue, Superman's about to propose to Lois, and then Godzilla shows up. He has to go deal with Godzilla, and then he gets taken down at the end of issue 2. Here, Flash gets hit in a fight with the Suicide Squad, or Task Force X, or whatever you want to call them. But he's not dead. They make that very clear, but he is wounded. So whether he's going to recover quickly in the third issue or if things are going to play out that he stays incapacitated for a little longer. I mean, when Superman was taken out, he was taken out until the last 2 issues. I don't know if they're going to do that with Flash per se, because I mean, not to downplay Flash or anything, but having him get taken out of the fight doesn't quite have the same level of impact as having Superman get taken out of a fight, right? Because Superman's the big guy. He gets taken down, you know that things are going badly. Flash gets taken down, that's not good, but it doesn't have the same impact. And I'm not saying that to diss the Flash. Trust me, I'm not trying to do that. But we will see what happens. I did kind of figure this was going to happen, and it happens very quickly, too. That's something I am noticing. I know we're only 2 issues in, but this particular series is moving way faster than the first crossover. And I mean way faster. The first one, like I said, first issue was entirely set up, and then the action starts in issue 2. With the second crossover, they don't have to really set anything up. It's assuming you already know how these 2 universes are going to intersect, but it's moving really quickly. I don't know if it's going to continue the breakneck pace. As long as it has an actual pacing to it and it isn't breakneck and it's not introducing too many things at once like the first crossover did, I think we'll be okay. Hopefully. But like I said, no Godzilla in this one. Although the final page does introduce some characters that I was surprised to see, and yet in hindsight, I guess I'm really not that surprised. I guess minor spoiler here if you haven't read the issue, but the very last page, and I guess I can add a timestamp if you really want to skip this, but the very last page shows Superman and Lex Luthor in the Hollow Earth encountering the Lost Kong tribe. Looks like One Eye is actually leading the charge. We don't see Scar King, not yet anyway, but, these are GXK characters. And again, I wasn't expecting that because, like I said, the variant covers and most of the promos, they've been pushing the KOTM characters. They've been with Mothra and Rodan and King Ghidorah. Nothing about Scar King or Shimo showing up, or Suko or any of those guys. But I suppose with GXK being the most recent movie, it's not that surprising. Okay, so with that out of the way, I am curious to see how this proceeds. I hope it doesn't get too bloated. It is possible for them to be throwing too much in still, and that was a problem with the first crossover. It was throwing in so many different things at once that certain plot lines didn't really have time to properly bake, and all of a sudden you just had stuff showing up out of nowhere, like or either not necessarily out of nowhere, but you didn't really feel like they were properly built up. I am hoping this crossover doesn't make that mistake. We are only 2 issues in, though, so at this point, anything can happen. And then, of course, we have the debut episode of Ultraman Omega, the latest entry in the Ultra series, which I was definitely looking forward to. I've really been loving that Subaraya Productions has been uploading their new series to YouTube, either with English subtitles or with English dubs, depending on what you prefer. I watched this episode subtitled, mind you, and that makes it accessible for fans all over the world. I loved Ultraman Blazar, watched that one all the way through, and yes, I did eventually catch the movie as well once it wound up on Tubi. Arc, I liked the experimental things it was doing in those early episodes, but about midway through, I just kind of stopped watching and didn't really pick it back up. I really don't have any reason why, other than Arc maybe felt like it was a bit more aimed at a younger audience specifically. And I'm not saying the whole, oh, if it's for kids, adults can never enjoy it sort of thing. I mean, look at the fandom that's sprouted up around Bluey, for heaven's sake. But, Arc didn't really feel like it had the same oomph that Blazar did. But Omega, I was looking forward to. Omega looked like it was going to have a little more intrigue to it, particularly with the angle of our Ultra having amnesia, it being set in a world that had never experienced kaiju attacks or alien invasions before, and, things like that. So we have our first episode. I would say that if you're familiar with the Ultra series, what you can expect is something that's kind of there's clearly a heavy influence of Ultra 7 in certain areas, as well as Ultra 7X, particularly with the amnesia bit, and there's a little sprinkling of Ultraman Nexus throughout. So that might give you an idea of what you're going to be in for. Now, if you're new to the Ultra series and you have no idea what any of that means, allow me to put it this way. This is a very interesting story about a world that's on the brink of changing, and the primary thing they have standing in the way of that change going badly, and who will potentially be the source of the change going well, doesn't even fully know who he is. He gets a little bit of his memory back at the end, but we don't know how much of it at this point. So that alone is a very intriguing idea. I have to give props to the guy who's actually playing the human form of Omega, because he plays amnesia really well. It's not as easy as you might think. Like, he has a blank expression for most of the episode. And the thing is, it's one thing to have a just plain old blank expression. It's another thing to be performing blankness. Like, you look at him when he's in a scene, when he's looking at the world around him, observing different things, holding conversations, and you believe that the character really doesn't have context for anything around him, that he's trying to understand, but he's not quite sure how, because he's lost his memory and therefore has no frame of reference for anything. And that is not easy. So the acting, of course, is great here. Once Ultraman Omega is actually in his Omega form, now, as far as design goes, this is a very, very red Ultraman. The only other Ultras I have seen at this point that are this red are Seven and Zerth. And of those two, Zerth was supposed to be a more satirical version of the concept. The design does take a little bit of getting used to, I suppose, particularly with how, like, the one thing that keeps standing out as a weird aspect to me is that he has the portion of his mouth that's still silver, but it's surrounded by red, and it almost looks like a Sentai Ranger mask almost, which isn't generally what the Ultra designs do. I'll probably get used to it. It's not a bad design. It's just the color is not what you generally see. Most Ultras are silver with red highlights. Omega is red with silver highlights. And we have our main kaiju antagonist, Garm, or Grime. One of those two. I only heard it pronounced once. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on it. But as far as he goes, he's a very straightforward first opponent. Cool design, like he's covered in drills and he has the really striking profile and everything. But in terms of personality, he's mostly there to just show up, cause destruction, and get defeated. As for Omega, the depiction, again, we're dealing with somebody who's got amnesia here, but he's got a certain element to him when he's fighting. Like, of the two most recent Ultra heroes that are the new ones as opposed to the new generation legacy characters, Blazar was definitely more of a wild barbarian type. Always loud, always gesticulating, never stopped moving almost. Arc had more of a traditional idea of a lot of body language, but he wasn't overpronounced the way Blazar was. Omega's a bit more, let us say, subdued. Like, what really stands out to me is a moment where he and Garm or Grime, whatever, I'm sorry I didn't look it up before recording this, that's on me, but they're kind of circling each other uh, during the fight. And his posture just sort of radiates a certain toughness he's got, but it's not like machismo. It's more just sort of a cool, even-handed, tough persona. Almost hard to describe, but when you see it, you understand it. And of course, the effects are pretty good. A lot of the budget for this episode's effects definitely went into the opening, where we see Omega in space battling these insectoid creatures that I'm sure are going to come back in the future and be possibly the primary antagonists. Who knows? But that sequence was definitely really cool, and it really it's the first thing we see, and it really grabs you in because it's presented without context. We don't know what's going on here, but we're definitely interested to find out. And I'm sure we're going to be learning more and more as things go on. But it's going to be predominantly Monster of the Week if the next episode preview is any indication. Overall, I would say there was nothing else about the episode that really stood out. Like, it wasn't doing any sort of visual experimentation the way Arc did, but the attitude of it, the sort of mood and tone that it's setting, I can definitely get behind that. So I'm going to be sticking with Omega unless it just completely loses me, but I don't think it's going to. I'm especially curious to see what happens when we introduce his ally monsters. They're not like capsule monsters that like Ultra 7 had, although again, that's another bit of influence there. But I'm curious to see how they'll factor in. Are they actually going to be more than just transforming weapons? I hope not, but they weren't in this episode. All I can say is I'm looking forward to seeing where the series is going. Okay, so those are my overall thoughts. I would say that issue 2 of Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong 2 is still moving along at a very brisk pace. There's potential for the story to get overloaded, but I'm hoping it doesn't. As for Ultraman Omega, off to a very good start. Definitely want to see where it's going. Lots of questions, and I'm hoping that they'll be answered in a satisfying way. And that's all I've got for now. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.